Put your hand up if you've got one of these on your seat. Put your hand up if you've got one of these, a smartphone. Put your other hand up if you have downloaded this onto your smartphone yet. Both hands. Very good, very good. Have a look at that. For all of you who always wanted to know if it was better value to feed peas or barley, well, our new app will tell you. Thank you to Jason Archer and some of the information also provided by Ag Research over the years. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce myself. Who said before? Hayden said before, if you don't, you need to measure what you're doing, otherwise you won't know where you're going, or words to that effect. I will quickly brutalise you with a run through far too many slides that have resulted from the 2017 CINTA survey. Most of you, I imagine, in this room would have been interviewed in October or November last year. I don't know what it was. It might have been the weather or something, or you were looking forward to Christmas, but the interviewers from CINTA said that it was probably the most pleasant set of farmers that they'd ever spoken to. You were happy to be interviewed. They couldn't get you off the phone. You wouldn't shut up about your deer. Some of you even said nice things about Deer Industry New Zealand, but you're going too far. Anyway, as I said, it's important to be measuring and monitoring what you're doing. In 2011, the deer industry surveyed deer farmers to get a view on deer farmers' use of common practices that could contribute to improved productivity, and also to get a better understanding about the sources of information and inspiration that farmers turn to. As a result of that work in 2011, it heavily influenced the development of the P2P program, and has heavily influenced many of the tools or the processes that we have developed as part of the P2P program. We significantly improved the Deer Industry New Zealand website. Clive, Jeremy, thank you Clive, told us to produce the Deer Facts. We invented advanced parties. We're now trialling regional workshops. We have produced a number of monitoring tools to let people chart where they are going. We're working with vets, farm advisors, rural professionals, and others who provide services to deer farmers to improve their knowledge of deer farming, and many of the tools which are now available. But what's changed since 2011, and are we doing some of the right things? So just very quickly, how have your farms changed? And this is your information, this is what you've told people. There's been little change in the number of deer-only farms since 2011. 19% were deer-only in 2011. That's about the same, 21% now. But there's been quite a substantial increase in herd size. 260, up to 264 velveting stags now, up to 407 breeding hinds per unit, up to 360 finishing deer. Been a fairly large increase in gross income across all of the farms. That's 482,000 on average. That's for the whole farm unit, not just for the deer component. One of the biggest shifts we observe has been the big increase in people who now have a velvet focus. It was 6% in 2011, now that's 22%, with a corresponding drop in the number of people who said that they were mainly focused on breeding and finishing, down to 27%. Of the people surveyed, 84% were DFA members, 16% were members of advanced parties. So 592 telephone interviews were completed over that period of time, and if we assume that there are about 1,500 commercial deer farmers now, that's a very, very large proportion of the overall deer farming numbers, and that gives these results quite a lot of statistical significance. Hands up, anybody? I didn't do statistics. I don't really know what statistical significance means, other than it's true. We asked you if you thought that if your deer were more productive. 70% of you thought that your deer were more productive than they were 5 years ago. Whether they are or aren't isn't really the matter, isn't really the issue. You think that they are, therefore you're probably prepared to invest a little bit more in their performance. We asked the different farm types a number of questions around some of the practices that you used which were considered to be beneficial for improving productivity, and then compared some of these to the answers that you gave in 2011. There's been a significant, and I use that in the statistical term, a significant increase in the use of supplementary feeding for hinds, pre and post weaning. 60% of you think that body condition scoring is a valuable use of your time. There's been a significant increase in the number of you who said that you referred to breeding values when selecting your sire stags, but there's been a reduction in the number of people who monitor mature hind live weights. We asked a similar set of questions of farmers who were finishers, primarily finishers, primarily around feeding and also around monitoring. Nearly 70% grow forage crops. Only, he says, well, I shouldn't be so judgmental, 55% said that you weigh deer regularly. I'm sure that our friends from Gallagher's or True Test would like to see that number getting a wee bit higher. There were increases in the number of people who undertook pasture analysis, but a decrease in the number of people who were calculating cents per kilogram dry matter consumed. Across the board, velveters did more stuff. They recorded more, they fed more, they took more responsibility for removing their own velvet. There was a lot more stuff being done for velvet-focused deer. Anyone would imagine there's been a wee bit of money involved in that over the last couple of years. We added in some questions around environmental management because that is becoming increasingly important. Many farmers are actively managing their farm's environmental impact in a variety of ways, primarily fencing off waterways or riparian planting. Not many, there was a large number, over 30%, who didn't have a formal plan but felt that they were keeping a good eye on it, and then only slightly above 7% actually had completed an LEP or similar. So again, there's a wee bit of work done there. It was kind of a wee bit, I suppose I found it a wee bit disconcerting that 15% didn't think that their deer farms had had any impact on the environment, or they hadn't taken any action to mediate it. So there's a bit of work to be done. We have heard from Hayden and Tim about the importance of health planning. And when we asked if you have an animal health plan specifically for your deer, 72% of deer farmers said yes. Paddy thinks you're telling fibs. He doesn't think you've got appropriate, formal, annually consulted animal health plans. I think you're probably right, but at least you knew that you were supposed to lie about it. So I'm quite happy about that. If we looked at the data a wee bit further and then asked those questions, which some of you may remember, we did ask, was it written down? We did ask, is it annually reviewed? We did ask, was it risk assessed? And 37% of respondees had an animal health plan which met that criteria. So that's substantially better than when we asked that question in a separate survey a couple of years ago. So in a summary of the changes that we have observed, there is more strategic feeding of deer, there is more use of breeding values, there is more proactive health management. There is a belief that your deer are more productive and therefore, I believe, worth investing in a little bit more. But there's less monitoring of hind live weight, there's fewer focused on velvet production, there's fewer doing feed budgeting than there were. And again, there's a substantial proportion of deer farmers who don't think that their deer farming operation has an impact on the environment. So there's a few work-ons there. Many of you will have seen this particular graphic before. It's known as the Sheath model. Gavin Sheath is one of our members of our advisory group. And basically it sums up that change will only happen when we get a combination of motivation, knowledge, and confidence. Just to try and bring this to life a little bit, I have the knowledge that I should vacuum the house before my wife gets home. I have the skills and equipment to do it, and I'm confident that I would do a good job. But where's my motivation? What's motivating me to actually do this? So it's a combination of all three. We did ask about what people's motivation for change was. And similar to 2011, the main motivations for change, making a change, implementing a new technique or a new technology on a property are to increase productivity and to increase profitability. One of the things to note, right down the bottom, is that there's a statistically significant decrease in the number of people who are making a change to improve the environment, but there is a significant increase in the number of people who are making a change because they had been forced to by rules or regulations. So only small, but that's quite noteworthy. We also asked about sources of knowledge. Where are you finding your information? Dear industry publications, you should be gratified to see that, Phil. Still number one. People still like Dear Industry News, but not as many as they did. So there's been a reduction in the number of people who found value in printed material or Dear Industry New Zealand publications. And perhaps that's because we do a little bit more of it now, therefore they're slightly less valued. But there is a substantial number of people who value the Dear Facts and the Dear Hub, and also listening to rural radio has improved. This is one which might depress the vets at the back of the room. Who are the people that you look to for knowledge? Regional workshops scored pretty well. Nearly 20% of people responded that regional workshops were influential. And industry field days, farm consultants, advanced parties also scored reasonably well. But like-minded farmers, as Sharon just said before, farmers look to farmers for a lot of the advice. And that sort of underpins a lot of what we are doing within the program. We did ask about barriers to change, and a lack of finance or capital, money, is still considered to be a substantial barrier to change. One of the things that we are aiming to do with the P2P program is to provide people with some certainty about where they can go to get some information. So it is nice to see that there has been a reduction in the number of people who say a lack of information is a barrier to change. But there's been a big increase in the number of farmers who reported that they were looking for an assurance that something was going to work, or they were not confident of the change, of the benefits of the change. And so that was stopping them making a change. And I guess that we observe the increasing complexity of farm management, the increasing number of impositions which are being placed upon you as farmers, and can certainly understand that it's a little bit difficult to know how to implement some of this stuff, and that it's necessary to seek some third-party support to know that you're doing the right thing. And that confidence comes from the following people, and this should cheer up the vets at the back of the group. Even though they don't use you very often, when they do ask you, they highly value your opinion. Whereas opposed to, sorry, farm consultants, they might use you more, but they don't really think you know what you're talking about. So field days, learning from like-minded farmers, again, are reasonably influential in assisting farmers gain the confidence to be making some changes. And what about the things that we've specifically done within Deer Industry New Zealand? I'm kind of cheating here. I'm trying to boost my statistics. We asked people on a scale of 1 to 5 whether something was any good or rotten. And 4 or 5 was good, 3 was neutral, 2 or 1 was rubbish. I've included the neutral figures in here because I kind of think that, you know, if it's not doing any harm, then it's probably okay. So what's that? 75% of people of you deer farmers thought that deer facts were okay. Over 50% thought that advanced parties were quite good. the deer growth charts got to 50% of you as well, and you thought that they were pretty good. The DINZ website is quite influential, and again, PGP regional workshops, even though they have only been up and running for about a year and we're still trying to figure out how to make them work well, are having a good impact on people. So that's nice, but what does it mean? As we roll into the last 4 years of the P2P project, how are we going to go about using this information to shape some of the activities that we do over the coming few years? So the researchers separated, or rather identified, two main groups within the deer farming population. They determined that there was one group of people who want to develop and grow, and they are primarily, and not exclusively, but they are primarily younger farmers. They've got larger herds, they've got higher incomes, and they plan to expand their deer operation in the next 5 years. So they've got more at stake, therefore they need to be taking more action to remain competitive. So the things that work for them are trials, examples, workshops, hands-on experience, and looking towards simple implementation methods. The other group are those which could be termed as happy with the status quo. And again, these were generally, but not exclusively, the older farmers with smaller herds, lower income, probably lower debt, and plans to downsize their operations. They weren't really influenced by the P2P program. They didn't really think that things that the P2P had done were any good. So we're not going to abandon these people, we just need to think up some different, clever ways of providing them with some information to help them make some decisions around their deer farming operation. We also asked you what your intentions were with regard to your deer farming operation. And I guess this is kind of fairly heartening for us as an industry, that there was about 75% of deer farmers who were interviewed were either going to maintain their deer farm or expand it. So 34% of deer farmers are in expansion mode at the moment, and that's up from 25% 6 years ago. And only 13% indicated that they were downsizing. And the reasons for downsizing their deer farming operation primarily, or nearly half of them, were because of their personal circumstances. They were either retiring or had ill health, or felt that they were too old to carry on. Very, very few people indicated that it was about a lack of profitability or that they were uncertain about the industry's prospects. And I guess this is something about statistics, isn't it, or bar charts. You see that there is a certain percentage of people who have a lack of faith in the future of the deer industry. You go, that's terrible. But if we did the numbers, then that's 4% of 13% of 592, which means there's 3 farmers out there who don't think the deer industry's got any money in it. So who are you? Come on, stand up. I want to know who you are. But more interestingly, why are people increasing their deer herds? And 34% of you said that it was because it's profitable. 15% said that you were confident in the future of the industry. And there were also some other nice things to observe around people being passionate for deer farming and deer being easy to farm. So the DINZ strategy, as we heard a little earlier on, is around creating a confident and growing industry. It would seem to me that your deer farmers are perhaps a step or two ahead already. So thank you very much.